Was that good? Does everybody have paper? Okay. People will need something to write on, something to write with. We're going to do some exercises. This is, thank you to CeiBA for having me, to Professor Zamora, to Tim, who invited me, Dr. DeVoe. I'm thrilled to be here. I am having such an exciting time in Bogota. I love it. I even love sitting in the room in the back and looking at everybody's beautiful hair. The hair is so good here. So this is so you know that I'm not a linear thinker. These are my notes. Everybody needs to have, does anybody not have something to write with? Does anybody need paper? You got it? Good. Thank you. How many people are writers in here? Do we have any budding novelists? Yes. Thank you. Do other people, does anybody journal? Do you keep journals? Do you write about yourself on social media? Yes. Good. I think there are two things that humans have a terrible fear of. Falling microphones. No, that's not one of them. One of them is speaking in public, and one of them is writing. And I think, can I make this higher? There, good, yes, thanks. I think we tell ourselves it's because we're afraid that we will make mistakes. But there really isn't a right way. There isn't a correct way to present yourself. There isn't a correct way to write in terms of self-expression. So really what we're afraid of is we're afraid of revealing ourselves. We're afraid of letting other people know what's going on, who we really are. And in writing, I teach writers, mostly. Some of them adults, some of them younger. Not children, but some younger college students, mostly older, mostly graduate students, some older individuals. Writers are often taught by other writers, and the lesson, the message is so often permission. You are allowed to say that. You are allowed to express yourself in that way. And I think we, as teachers of writer, teachers of self-expression, are often up against what the English teachers, the composition teachers have instilled in everybody, which is there's a very correct way to do everything. And writers are always about finding new ways, breaking the mold, finding your own voice for things. I think that telling stories is a profoundly important human activity. I think listening to stories is very powerful. I think falling down the stairs is very frightening. We all have good storytellers in our lives. I mean, whether we read for pleasure or not, we all have people in our lives who are incredible storytellers. And what a good storyteller creates, and this can happen through listening, and it can also happen through reading, is you have the experience in your body of the story. You have the physical experience. You know, now they can map your brain and see that when you're reading, you really are scared, you really are in flight, you really are in love. All of those things happen physiologically. So writing, being able to write, to truly represent your experiences, your feelings, your inner life, your inner self, is a very powerful thing to be able to do. It allows you to connect with people so far outside yourself. Thank you. I was going to show you my book. I wrote a novel. This is in English. It's been translated in some language. This is not my knees. This is just my words. But it has connected me with people that I will never meet, but I don't want to meet, I don't have to meet. But people will write me and say, you told my story, or I so connect to you. And for me, that's been a profound experience. I think writers are often formed out of necessity. I think people come to writing sometimes pretty late in their lives. And it's when an awareness of death comes in. It's when you have a sense of, oh my goodness, what is my legacy? What am I going to leave behind? And I regret not coming to writing earlier. I think it's terribly important for people to witness their lives. I think it's terribly important to tell your stories. I think it is transformative to share your experiences and to share them in writing as clearly and as vulnerably as you can allows other people to experience what you may have experienced yourself. And, you know, I mean, one of the tragedies of our lives is that we only get one. We only get our own experience. And reading and stories is a way of, I mean, Amy was speaking so beautifully about compassion and about empathy. And writing is a way to connect to other lives. So I think we have a tendency not to see ourselves as a character. We don't see ourselves as Harry Potter or whoever. We see ourselves as the observers. You know, we see ourselves as the everyman. But really, each of us is deeply engaged in a narrative. We are making a story. Our lives are our stories. And there is an integrity to our stories that is not obvious at the beginning of your life. And I wanted to do a few exercises that I hope will demonstrate something to you about your character, who your character is, what the patterns of your life might be. And I want to say up front that these are completely private. They will not be shared. I'm not going to call on anybody and read your story. If you want to tell people later, that's marvelous. If you don't, please feel no obligation. So there are intense moments, emotionally intense moments in our lives that are peak experiences for one reason or another. And I'm going to ask you to think about an experience that may have been the proudest you ever felt. Now just take a moment. I would prefer if you use something not from early childhood, but later, but just take a moment and collect yourself. Think about what it might be. I can tell you mine. I once wrote a play. I used to be an actress, and I wrote a play, and it was done in New York. And the performance, the first night, it was very crowded in the audience, and I was sitting there with my father and my sister beside me. I don't know where, my mother stayed home. And the play opens, it's a love story, and there's a boy and a girl, young man, young woman on stage, and she begins by reciting a poem. And the poem is terrible. And it's not only terrible, it has a very kind of odd, crude reference in it that fortunately my father didn't understand. And so there's this moment of the audience being in horror, like, oh my goodness, we are sitting in a terrible play, and we are here with the author in the house, and we are all embarrassed for her. And then the second character, the boy, makes a joke of it, and everybody laughed. And it was this moment for me of feeling they're with me, and there is a sense of togetherness in this experience, and it was very profound. It's a kind of, I don't even, when I'm not in a good mood, I can't even remember that. That memory is gone. So that's mine. But take a moment and check in with yourself. You can close your eyes, you can relax for a moment, you can just, we write from our bodies, so check in with your body. Make sure your legs are uncrossed, feel the floor. Feel the weight of yourself in the chair. Really be in the room. The grown-ups have to write too. They do. So does everybody have something? So I want you to just take a few moments and write the story for yourself. And make sure that you include the senses, any sights, any smells, any sounds. No talking. I can imagine this is a very proud group of people. I know that you're all very accomplished. But this is a very personal moment of accomplishment, something that made you feel profoundly proud. This is really just quick notes to yourself for the story that you're going to write later if you want to write it down. Just the memories. Make sure to include any colors. You may find irrational details that want to be included. Just note them down. 1 more minute. This is going to make very bad video. I don't want to tear you from your stories, but make yourself a few notes so you can continue later if you want to. Okay, good. Don't stop if you need to keep going, but I'm going to start talking again. I think stories of pride on the outside are all the same. Conceptually, they're the same. But inside, there's deep individuality, and that's part of character. See, there's somebody else fell down the stairs. One of the things that has struck me in my very short time in Bogota is, I went to the Museum of Gold, and I'm looking at this wonderful building. There's great pride and skill in artisan work, in craftsmanship. And I think that's a very deeply human satisfaction, both seeing it and making things. I think as human beings, we are hardwired to want to make things. And part of what we are making is our story. If you can make it in a written form, you will be able to disperse it more widely. By sharing your story, your individual story, you join history, you join your times. And I think that's, one of the reasons we are assembled here together is this is a very important time. And what you've come through recently is so different from what the future will be. It's a fulcrum time. And your witnessing of your own experiences enrich the history for everyone. I don't want to say anything bad about science because I have a sense that the writers in the room are outnumbered by the scientists by quite a lot. But in science, there are many rules about things being replicable and verifiable and reliable. And in writing, we really have only one, which is don't be boring. That's really it. Don't be boring. And part of being boring is doing what is expected, is doing what is appropriate. So that the training of writers, the training of artists is very different from a kind of mainstream education in a lot of ways. I think many artists find themselves educated outside of colleges. They find themselves mentored by other artists. They find people who say, yes, you can do this. That's fine. Keep going. And for writers, it's very often in the books they read, or it starts in the books they read. They may not find teachers, but they read a book and think, oh my goodness, that's a narrative that enriches my idea of how stories are told, or that's a character I have never seen before. That empowers me to put my crazy ideas on the page. I think one of the powers of engaging with your own narrative is that as human beings, we need to have a sense of a journey. We need to have a sense that we're going somewhere, that there is hope, that there is a plan. And when you learn to deeply engage with your own narrative, you will recognize the moments of your life as part of this journey. You will recognize the importance of, it's a bit like, I think religious people would talk about it as an awakening, and I just think of it as a kind of heightened ability to observe your times, your moment, your own life. It's not trivial, and it doesn't come around again. I have another exercise for you, if you will. I know nobody has had their lunch, and I hope the cake has sustained you. I want to say a little bit about writing is tricky because it isn't linear, because it's such a different experience to read than it is to write. So you think that writing is like reading, but really writing is like going into the lab and trying things, and you discover the narrative. You may not understand the power of your narrative. You may not even understand what's compelling you to write until you're more deeply into the story itself. But if you keep a writing practice, if you keep some engagement with writing, you will be able to deliver the powerful stories. Because what writing, the process of writing is really a kind of a dance with your own unconscious. You are learning to say yes to the weird, the maybe unacceptable, the surprising, the dark elements that are private. So take a moment and think about the most frightened you've ever been. Again, completely private, not sharing these. Prefer something not from childhood, but more recent, more adulthood. Again, I can tell mine. I'm away from my children. I mean, my teenagers are in the United States with their father, and so this story has particular resonance. My son has been camping, but this is the story of when he was much younger, and he set a fire. And the fire, he was experimenting with a magnifying glass and the sun and a little piece of paper, and it wasn't working. It really wasn't working, and he stopped. And I went away because I was working in the garden. And my neighbor, who's a doctoral student in physics, came and showed him how to hold the magnifying glass farther away. So he got the rays to, and he really set a fire then. And I was on the other side of the house, and I heard his shrieking, and I ran, and I tried to put it out, and we all tried to put it out, and it spread like a ring, just so fast, even though it was April, which is rainy, but there was a little furze of dry grass, and the fire just, and I ran to get the hose and, turn the water on, spray it, and what was going through my head, of course, was, my neighborhood is going to burn, my neighbor's house is going to go, everybody's going to hate me, anyway. We did get the fire out. I didn't help very much. I tried. I burned my legs. It was awful. I was wearing shorts. But my son was so terrified, he went to bed. It was the middle of the day. He just went to bed. He just pulled the covers up and went to bed. And the firemen came, and all the men had stories for him of the time that they his father set the woods on fire. Everybody had done some version of that. And I watched my son, in a way, join the men in thinking this is some kind of rite of passage, maybe, that you set a fire and it's all right. But for me, it was horrifying. It was a horrifying moment. So I'm going to be quiet. I want you to check back in to your physical being. Take a breath. Think about the most frightened you've ever been. Again, include the senses. Any particular smells? This isn't easy. Okay. Could you feel the difference in the room? I mean, there was a palpable difference in the room between the two stories. I'm not a shaman, but the energy was different. So, fear stories, again, could be seen as similar. One of the principal elements of fear is often shame, loss of control. There is a relationship between these two stories that you've written, your two stories. And I would like to challenge you to find the pattern. Fear is the opposite of pride. If you think of it even physically, you know, the pride is this, the chest is out, look at me, and fear is hiding and cringing and protection. So the stories also have a relationship with each other of contrast, of opposites. As writers and as individuals engaging with our own narrative, you need to see the patterns. It sounds very weird. It sounds weird that there are patterns in your life that are consistent to you and that would be consistent in other peak emotional experiences, the saddest you've ever been. I could point out some obvious ones in mine. You know, there's the sense of the audience, the sense of the assemblage of people. There's also, in mine, there's always someone in a uniform. A fireman, a doctor, somebody in a uniform. There are other weird patterns that you can see, but I challenge you to find them in your own work. For writers, pattern is our meaning. When you look at the construction of a good novel, you will see how these reversals, how the opening scene and the closing scene will echo each other, even something as trivial as blue. So that's one reason I'm giving you this exercise. And the other one is that this material is it's your treasure. These stories are your currency. And when you want to illustrate something, even if it's something very far removed from you, this kind of work gives you emotional fluency that will connect with the reader. And I'm going to say something that I feel okay saying in the land that gave birth to magic realism, because it is kind of magic. If you use an element from this story that is your story, for instance, I might use the woman wearing shorts, you know, in her backyard, she's wearing shorts. The shorts, for me, were a kind of a horrible unpreparedness, inability to kind of wade into the fire and put it out. And if I were to use that vulnerability in the form of the clothing, it would be transmitted to the reader. The reader would receive that in their own sense of physical vulnerability. Just the shorts. It's a little bit magic, but it's also very simple. So I encourage you to write these stories out more fully. I encourage you to look at them and compare them. I had a mentor, a wonderful writer. He wrote movies. And he used to, when he taught screenwriters primarily, but he used to say, tell the story that will save your life. What is the story that someone else told you to save your life? And I puzzled about that, because I thought, no, nobody ever has told me a story to save my life. But my sister was very sick, and she was in the hospital, and I got a call to come that it was very close to the end. and she had cancer, and she had been irradiated too much so that her skin was falling off. And she couldn't, you can't stabilize your body if you don't have skin. Skin is enormously protective. And so I got to New York City as fast as I could, and the social workers grabbed me and sat me down and said, we want to prepare you for death, for your sister's death. And I thought, well, first of all, I don't know you. And second of all, that's not the story here. The story here is that she's going to live. That was my story. And so I thanked them. I hope I was polite. I didn't feel polite. And I went to my sister's room where our mother was. And our mother, she was 92 at that point. And she was a psychologist. She was a child psychologist. So she believes in change. She believes in growth. She's also an activist. And she sat with my sister overlooking the Hudson River, the George Washington Bridge, where my parents decided to get married. And she talked for hours, and she told my sister the story of our lives. And she told my sister the story of our family. I couldn't reproduce any of it, but it was the most remarkable narrative. And my sister got better. She started to heal, and the doctors were amazed. It also, there was a problem because she was in a cancer ward, but she was really like a burn patient. She was, she needed burn care. And there is a great burn hospital that belongs to Cornell, and this was not it. So they couldn't work together. So I called the president of Cornell, and he got someone from the burn hospital to come over. And the two hospitals started to collaborate, and the nurses started to be taught how to bandage my sister's skin. And I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. I slept in her room, and then we left. And the day we were leaving, she's an artist. She wanted to make a card for the nurses. So we're sitting in there, and we have the art supplies and the glue and the scissors, and she's making these wonderful, complicated cutouts. The medical personnel kept coming in and kind of looking at us, and they didn't know what was going on because it was play. We were playing. That's what we were doing. It was just like our childhood. We were playing, and I bought her a $3 dress on the street to wear out, and she wore this red, white, and blue dress with bandages all over her arms and a funny hat. She had no hair. And we left that room. And when we had arrived in that room, there was little pieces of skin. When I had arrived in the room, my sister's skin was all over the floor. And when we left, there were little pieces of art, little scraps of paper all over the floor. And it was just like a story. It was just like fiction. It was just like a pattern had been set. I think there are stories that will save your life. I think you all know them. They will save your life. I encourage you to find them. I encourage you to share them. I encourage you to learn how to write them in compelling ways so that they can be translated, so that they can be spoken to other people. And thank you.